This video has gone through a lot of different titles in the planning process. The first was similar to the one you see now, a defense of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. And then it changed to a slight defense of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, until it transitioned to I can't defend Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, until coming back around to a video where I could both defend it and point out steps that could help save the game and help it live up to its potential. This serves as a spoiler warning for everything left to come, to include everything through the endgame. I'll be talking about my opinions on the game and where its future should go, but this won't be a formal review. And don't come in here with the, "Don't worry TGP, 99% of people won't waste their time with this game, so don't worry about spoilers." I wanted to take my time and make sure I really understood the game, and by the time I got around to completing it, there's already plenty of reviews up. Speaking of said reviews, I have noticed the majority are overwhelmingly negative. That isn't surprising. When people talk about this game, they act like it came into their house, shot their grandma, pissed on her body, and then cracked a beer from the fridge. And Boomerang probably tried cutting a finger off while they were at it. But, funnily enough, as Paul Tassi from Forbes points out in an article, the critical reviews and the user reviews couldn't be more different. On platforms where you have to actually own the game to rate it, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has performed exceptionally well. As of writing, it sits at an 82% positive score on Steam with over 3,000 reviews, 4.45 stars out of 5 on PlayStation with over 6,000 reviews, and 4.5 stars out of 5 on Xbox with over 1,000 reviews. In fact, the only place where there is a negative user review score is on Metacritic, where you don't have to purchase the game or verify you even played it to leave a review. Interesting. So, if you're locked in that this game is a trash heap and it will never get better no matter what, this might not be the video for you. I do hope to change your mind though. I can understand that reaction to an extent. The Arkham games are near and dear to a lot of people, myself included. They redefined the superhero genre and gave players control over the Dark Knight in a way many had dreamed of but never really thought possible. Not to mention that every game, including the one that isn't made by Rocksteady, hit in its own way. However, I think the Batman Arkham games are benefiting from something I like to call Star Wars prequel syndrome. Arkham Asylum and City both gathered Metacritic scores in the 90s, with the latter outperforming the former. But Origins, again, not developed by Rocksteady, but definitely borrowing from the Arkham formula, only mustered a 74. And Arkham Knight, even with its amazing production and graphics, managed a respectable but still disappointing 87. Unless you were on PC, where poor performance garnered a 70. People lampooned the Batmobile and the over-reliance on the Joker. The twist in the story that was obvious to anyone who picked up a comic before. The nature of the ending. But then the Suicide Squad game was announced, and people, as people do, were hesitant to change. This drove them back to those older games, flaws and all, and people started to hold them on higher pedestals. Similar to the way that the newer Star Wars films drove people back to the hated prequel trilogy, except they came back with rose-tinted glasses and started to appreciate them more. Go look right now at any Arkham games user reviews and you will see droves of people flocking back to these games and holding them up on those pedestals, claiming that these are the true Arkham games and the real end of the story in the case of Arkham Knight. Thankfully, as someone who enjoyed both Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight at launch, I never had this issue. I always looked at those games as excellent and would replay them the same way I would the first couple titles. So my approach to Rocksteady's Suicide Squad game was cautiously and admittedly stupidly optimistic. And then the game launched and I saw a lot of reviewers that I really loved the opinions of, raking it over the coals. And the reasons that they presented made sense a lot of the time. But then when it came to the actual playing of the game, I was having fun with my friends. So I was torn. And the tagline of this channel is always authentic. And I end every video with stay authentic. And that's for a reason. And that's because I believe that far too often people aren't true to themselves on reviews or opinions. So I decided that maybe having fun with friends was the variable. So I played by myself. And the game was admittedly less fun. And the issues that the game has did become more evident. But I still wasn't having a 5 out of 10 experience or thinking the game was terrible or anything like that. And then I got to the Batman level and I was like, oh, here we go. Here's where I start to hate this game. And then the level came and went. And I didn't feel any real loathing as much as I just felt underwhelmed. I appreciate the sequence of the level trying to do something different within its limitations, but the boss itself was just a giant bullet sponge and it was pretty meh, but nothing I would take offense to. And then almost immediately, you're fighting Superman, a dangerously underbaked character who hasn't even uttered a line in the game before you fight him. But one whose boss fight was probably my favorite in the game, and then he's dead, and I was honestly just left thinking, that's it? And then I got through Brainiac on Earth 2, and I rolled credits, and I got a taste of the endgame. And at that point, I was around the I can't defend this game line of thinking. But then my friend asked me to get on, and I replayed that portion of the game again, and something clicked for me. That was all Act 1. So far, I had been looking at this game as a complete experience, but once I reframed it all and realized this game was far from over, I was able to get my optimism back. My initial thoughts on the game are traversal is fun. I have some issues with enemy variety and how they handle weapons, which we'll get into, but overall combat is a good time. The performances in the game are excellent, the presentation is gorgeous, the looks of the characters are good, and the settings themselves are fun, and I look forward to seeing the new ones they come up with. A lot of Metropolis does feel like empty calories though, and you do zip around so much you rarely take time to breathe and take in the scenery. Character variety is good so far, and integrating it with your friends works well. Even the crossplay functionality had no hiccups in my playtesting. I think the game is good. Not great, not amazing, not bad, not horrible. Better than okay, it's good. But this game does have a lot of potential with what was presented, and if Rocksteady was able to hit on these next 3 key areas, they could essentially turn this game from good to great for me personally, and potentially save it for a lot of others. These 3 key pillars are going to be combat, the story, and the fan service. Starting off with combat, I think the main gripes come down to enemy variety and weapon variety. Enemies are essentially big monsters with purple weak points, and none of them are particularly memorable or threatening. Even the giant tanks or helicopters are covered with these glowing purple weak points, and while that may not bother me, I can understand the criticisms. The enemies that incorporate some of the Justice League members' powers are a nice touch, but I feel like the game didn't lean hard enough into that. The Arkham games didn't have the craziest enemy variety either, but they did introduce enemies that made you think. You couldn't use the same moves on an enemy with a shield that you would on an enemy with a baseball bat, etc. This game boils down to a lot of shoot, 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 whether it's a tank or a sniper. So if Rocksteady could somehow incorporate more of a flow in combat that makes the player think about the encounter more than just mindlessly shooting away, I think it would go a long way. That being said, I think the counter system is a really interesting idea to incorporate into a shooter. A gripe I do have though is the weapon system. And this is more of an overarching problem with the games as a service genre than just Rocksteady, but they just don't give me a reason to use anything less than a legendary weapon. The best effects and stats are all my higher level weapons, so there is no reason to use anything else. I think Rocksteady is on the right track though with their Infamy sets and Notorious weapons. They're all great callbacks to different villains in the DC universe, and they all have unique features. Same goes for the Notorious items. Get rid of everything below Legendary and make standard weapons just the normal weapon you get. And then make the Notorious and Infamy weapons the driving force behind loot in the game. Because literally anytime I got an item that was not at the very least Legendary, it did nothing for me and gave me no reason to incorporate it into my loadout. But Rocksteady has shown they know how to create unique weapons that incorporate fun elements into them. They could even bring in certain melee weapons that represent heroes in the way the traversal items do, but steer more into the uniqueness of the universe rather than just pumping out a million guns that essentially do the same things, because quality over quantity would go a long way here and would make earning loot a lot more satisfying than completing a mission and earning something that will immediately be broken down for resources. With my gripes on that section out of the way, let's move on to where a lot of people who have probably not even picked up the game have issue: the story. Let me be clear, the story so far isn't great. That doesn't say it's bad in any way, but it's 100% unfinished, and that was the part that I wrestled with the most. The game you get at launch essentially feels like Act 1, so when trying to look at it as a complete package, of course it feels half-baked. It is. The base game is essentially a tutorial section for half of it, and then it just jams in defeating not 1, not 2, but 4 freaking members of the OG Justice League, and then having another one die in the cutscene. And the pacing just feels off. It feels a bit too easy. I think that's where a lot of the criticism comes from. It should not be easy for these 4 characters to take down Batman, the Flash, Green Lantern, and especially not the god that is Superman. But what if there was a reason behind it? What if these weren't the actual members of the Justice League we know and love? There were some story inconsistencies brought to light, and I think they could be leading to this game turning from Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League to Suicide Squad Save the Justice League. For one, in a throwaway line while you're traversing, you can hear Batman say to Brainiac, Superman isn't ready yet, but they speed him along. And then when we finally see Superman, he doesn't even speak. Not even a word to Wonder Woman before he kills her. Not only this, but the kryptonite on her shield doesn't even faze him. She shoves it into his heart, and he's still strong enough to end her life and fly back to Brainiac's ship. And the next time we see him, he's pretty much okay and talking like nothing happened. Also, the inconsistencies of Flash. Flash gets his finger cut off by Captain Boomerang before he's taken by Batman, but when he reappears, he's got his finger back. And while most could see that as an oversight, the fact that they comment on it mean it is just a breadcrumb laid by Rocksteady. So maybe these aren't the actual members of the Justice League we kill, rather versions of Brainiac cooked up while the actual members of the League are on his ship being kept for their DNA. It would explain why King Shark was able to use the Lantern Ring and the ring falling unceremoniously into the water without shooting to the next Green Lantern to use, because the real ring is still on John, somewhere being used to do things like keep up barriers and provide armor to the helicopters. So, when you kill Brainiac at the end of the game, he can turn into the Flash. And we see that Season 1 will bring Brainiac versions of Green Lantern and Superman along with it. So him cloning members of the League isn't very far-fetched in my opinion. He even asked the squad after they defeated Superman how they defeated his Justice League. In the scene where Wonder Woman has Flash in her lasso, you see him pull away from Brainiac for a second, and he says the only way to defeat them is to kill them. But it might be the only way to defeat those versions of them. But it still may be very possible to pull the actual League members away from Brainiac's control. This is all just a theory, of course.
A game theory!
But Rocksteady and their 8-year development cycle probably planned out the entire story long in advance. So it struck me as odd that they wouldn't build more into it than the entire Justice League dying before Season 1 launches and then nothing else coming from it. Only time will tell what happens next, but I still think before it's said and done, they have a few more tricks up their sleeves to keep it interesting. I think a lot of that was lost on fans who saw Batman being shot in the head and it led to outcry. The game isn't finished. Therefore, we don't even know if Batman is actually dead. So I think Rocksteady can really turn around with a good, calculated content release and helping people understand that this game might not be as radical or disrespectful as they might think. And that leads me to my final point, fan service. It is obvious that people hold the Arkhamverse in high regard, and that many felt this game spit on that. But I think Rocksteady needs to make a constant effort to show these fans that they still care about these characters, and that extends past the story. The current outfits at launch are lackluster. The classic outfits are cool, but they could have came with a lot more variations. Rocksteady has shown they know how to do this because in both Arkham City and Arkham Knight, there were a ton of different outfits from different iterations of Batman. From movies to comics to the animated series, Rocksteady needs to turn this up to 11. And they need to do it in a much less predatory way. Some cosmetics in the store is fine, but damn, they need to make a way for you to unlock more than they already do. A lot of this might be solved with seasonal content updates and the season pass, but something tells me the good stuff you'll have to fork over some cash for. But if they want to get the fans to have more faith in this game, WB is going to have to start to worry less about lining their pockets, because the more they can pull people into the game or back into the game, the more money it will make them in the long run. Another thing they need to do is just show fans they really do care about these characters. The voice logs are a good touch, but being more overt about it will be integral to gather back the fan base. Whether fairly or unfairly, people feel like Rocksteady disrespected characters they hold close to their hearts. So I think as long as Rocksteady can show that they actually know what they're doing, it could go a long way to making this game successful. Something I don't want to see would be them introducing new characters but forgetting about the original 4. They should still get plenty of love and development. And how Rocksteady introduces adding playable characters will show a lot. Do all characters appear in cutscenes? Are certain missions locked to certain members of the squad? If they handle it tastefully, it should work out well. But I for one am mixed on this game. I see the foundation being set for an excellent time. I think the gunplay is fun, traversal is excellent, and the story has not gone to a place where they can't make an excellent story happen. I think the voice acting is also great, and the graphics are clean, and the performance so far hasn't given me any issues, save for a single game crash towards the end of the game. I think the game is a blast to play with friends, and I do like that each character has their own feel. While gameplay isn't radically different enough that it creates a huge learning curve, they have already set a good foundation between the different afflictions and characters and the leveling system and progressing further into the game. And I do believe they're building towards something that is excellent, but they're going to have an uphill battle to climb. And if they don't do some of the things I've mentioned prior, they might not win that battle, and this game could turn into the next Marvel's Avengers. But hopefully it doesn't, and hopefully this game still has a lot left to show everyone. And a year from now, people can talk about how Rocksteady really pulled it off and showed that they knew what they were doing all along. And I hope that what we played in month 1 is just the tip of the iceberg for what this game has left, but only time will tell. But one thing's for sure is I'm interested enough to show up for future seasons, and hopefully that doesn't fade the further we go. But feel free to let us know how you feel about the game. What you think needs to happen to make this game better, or if you think that this game is just hopeless and they should scrap any future plans for it. We just ask that you keep it civil. Thanks for watching, and if you like content like this, go ahead and subscribe, and we promise to keep it coming. And until next time, stay authentic.